In a Nuzlocke, any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and in this challenge, I'm only allowed to catch the first steel type I find in an area. Sadly, Hoenn only has 8 steel encounters to offer, and even fewer since we can't get the mythical Jirachi. Registeel's also off the table since it's legendary and otherwise questionably aligned. This leaves us with just 6 Mons, 3 of which are all found in Granite Cave. This also eliminates Probopass, so we're down to less than a full team of 6 before even starting the challenge. Which doesn't even address the biggest problem that the first steel type we can get is after 2 badges. Okay, there is one other way, but we'd have to start this Nuzlocke back in 2014.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
It's 2014 and life is good. There's no TikTok, I'm 16 years old, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire just came out. But most importantly, Auras released alongside an event giving you access to Steven's Beldum at the very start of the game. This Beldum is more than meets the eye. It's always shiny and comes with unusually good moves since Beldum otherwise just comes with Takedown. It comes with a free Metagrow site, which is great, but my Nuzlocke rules only allow Mega Evolution in fights where we actually face Mega Evolutions. There are 2 pretty big drawbacks to this Beldum, the first being that it was given to us by Steven, meaning it has his original trainer number, and thus we can't change its nickname. We're still gonna call it Megatron, but that's not the biggest problem. If you've ever used a Pokemon that doesn't have your original trainer number, you've definitely run into the issue of it not obeying you. I get insanely lucky the first turn, both connecting and getting a flinch. After that, I'm not so lucky, since Beldum decides to become a disobedient little turd. Just use the move! Frustratingly, even though Geodude can barely touch Beldum, it takes me down into the red before I hit my next Iron Head. Pathetically, it's not even enough to take Geodude out, so I take another Rock Tomb going down to 2 HP. Which means now, even though I am lucky enough to connect with the next Iron Head to take Geodude out, I have to face Nosepass with only 2 HP remaining. Beldum decides to loaf around, and so despite having the best possible type matchup, I lose the first attempt of this challenge extremely prematurely. With a fresh reset and a fresh Megatron, I have no choice but to roll the metaphorical RNG dice once more. And this time, Lady Luck is definitely on my side. All I need is to not be disobeyed for like 10 turns, but Megatron, the absolute unit, listens to every single command, and Roxanne is left in the rubble. I'm glad this only took 2 attempts, but the best part about it is that Megatron will always obey after Roxanne, since the level cap is always lower than the obedience threshold. After my victory, I'm summoned to speak to the richest man in Hoenn.
It seems someone has stolen a rare Pokemon I intended as a gift for my son. You wouldn't have seen anything, young trainer.
Yeah, no, on a completely unrelated note though, I've gotta get going. It's safe to say I left the country as fast as I could, and you won't believe what happened when I got to my destination. But first a word from this video's sponsor, Ion Classic. If you're itching for an authentic classic MMORPG experience, this is the game for you. You can relive the good old days back when we had no troubles at all. Ion delivers that old school MMO feel with everything you love about the classic MMO vibe, but with modern quality of life improvements. Grow and customize your character. If you're anything like me, you can spend hours in character creation, and Ion certainly delivers. Create your Deva and choose from a variety of classes to suit your personal playstyle, and explore the vast world full of wonders and discover the hundreds of quests as you pick your side in the epic battle between the Asmodians and Elios. Join other players from around the world and create your own legion to loot awesome dungeons or have PvP battles versus up to hundreds of other players. Use the link down in the description or the pinned comment to register and use my code AntlerBoyDeva to get all kinds of useful items when you start the game. Players joining between November 15th and January 3rd get a 7-day premium membership, a free costume, and even a temporary pet. Check out the link below and use my code to join the fun. My first order of business upon reaching Dupert is the gym battle that I was least worried about going into this challenge. Yes, Brawly is the fighting type gym leader, which theoretically should be a huge problem for steel types, but Megatron is a psychic type. I simply click Zen Headbutt twice and the gym battle's already over. From here, things are not quite as straightforward as they would be in Generation 3, since we can't get access to the bottom floor of Granite Cave until we have the bike. This means we're still unable to get our second encounter. The only encounter I have is with Steven, who's looking for his lost birthday present. I hurry to the open sea once more, but that stupid Mr. Briny won't take me to Kanto, so I'm stuck in Slateport. Here, I have my first run-in with Team Magma, a huge existential threat for my steel types. These guys are really into fire types. Well, specifically one fire type. Hoenn doesn't exactly have a lot of fire or ground types to work with, but we only ever see Team Magma using one. And in my first encounter with it, I immediately miss a Zen Headbutt. This is incredibly bad, since Flame Burst deals 30 points of damage, and after an Oran Berry, I only get back up to 27. So even though my next Zen Headbutt connects, this is sadly the end of attempt 2. Except instead of ending me, Numel goes for Focus Energy. Why the AI ended up showing mercy, I cannot tell you, but I'm very glad that I didn't lose attempt 2 to the very first Magma Grunt that we run into. Our Magma troubles aren't quite over yet though, since we have to fight a second Grunt without even getting to heal in between. He even has 2 Pokemon, but his Zubat perishes immediately to a Zen Headbutt that I actually connect with. His second Pokemon is also a Numel, but this time 2 levels lower. This actually makes a huge difference since it doesn't have Flame Burst, which it gets at level 15. This means anything barring a burn from Ember or possibly a critical hit means that we win and get to move on with attempt 2. Now that we get to leave Slateport, we can finally get our second Steel type encounter on Route 110, Magnemite. It's only available here as a rare Horde encounter, which took me an incredibly long time to find, but definitely worth it. The only other way is to get it after Primal Groudon, which is a little too late considering how few encounters we actually have access to. Bumblebee comes with Sturdy, which could be incredibly useful considering how much we have to take on Team Magma. Right now, we're facing way more immediate troubles, however, since we have to take on the Route 110 Mayfight. Because our Combusken can easily just sweep our team and destroy the attempt, we have to do some EV training, and luckily we now have access to Super Training. I have to commit to maxing out Megatron's defense, since otherwise we stand no chance against Flame Wheel. And so we go into the fight that's ended so many Hoenn Nuzlockes and speedruns. Despite having done all that Super Training, this fight is far from a guaranteed victory. Conveniently, we've just picked up an Electric type as she leads with her Water type Wailmer. She also very peculiarly goes for the resisted rollout, which doesn't do much except breaks my Sturdy. My reason for going for Thunder Wave the first turn was entirely based on May using her most powerful move, Water Gun, which would deal a lot more damage than these pathetic rollouts. It does also let me outspeed the next 2 turns, so I get to take out Wailmer without taking too much damage. Combusken comes in next, and because Bumblebee is at such high health, I decide to stay in and try to paralyze it. Combusken doesn't have a non-crit one-hit KO here, so it just goes for a random move, ending up being Sand Attack, and I still manage to connect with my Thunder Wave. The next turn, I make a bit of a mistake. It's obvious that Combusken's gonna go for Flame Charge to try and get its speed back to normal, so really I should have swapped out. That is what I end up doing this next turn, but after a second Flame Charge, Combusken is back to neutral speed, however, it just gets fully paralyzed. A second Flame Charge would not be enough to KO me, but it wouldn't give me any wiggle room to miss a Zen Headbutt. It seems at this point, I was still in favor with Lady Luck, something I can't say for the rest of the challenge. With May defeated, Megatron gets to level 20, finally evolving into Metang. And now that we've reached Mauville City, we get access to the Mach Bike. I use it to backtrack to Granite Cave, where we can finally reach the lower floors. By walking around and not using Rock Smash, we only have 2 possible encounters, Mawile or Aron, and the latter is much more likely to appear. The minus defense nature is pretty sad, but having Sturdy on a second Pokemon more than makes up for it. One final thing we can do before taking on Watson is go to the Mauville Pokemart, where they actually just straight up sell Bulldoze TMs. The fact that we can just buy Bulldoze makes the Gen 6 Watson fight a lot easier than its Gen 3 counterpart. He sends in a Magnemite of his own, so I lead with Optimus Prime. Optimus outspeeds with a quad-effective Bulldoze, taking Magnemite down to its Sturdy. This does lower Magnemite's speed, but it slows us down even more with a Thunder Wave. In this case, that's actually kinda good, since the next turn Watson's guaranteed to go for a Super Potion, so we take Magnemite down to its Sturdy once again. Despite the second speed drop, Magnemite is still faster here due to the Gen 6 paralysis changes. Magnemite then goes for Volt Switch, and that's actually kind of good for us as long as we don't get fully paralyzed. The Volt Switch swaps in Voltorb, which just gets immediately destroyed by a Bulldoze. Magnemite comes back in, but because of the health we got back from an Oran Berry, we can actually just stay in and take the second Volt Switch. This time, Watson only has one option to swap into, being his Magneton, which, unlike Magnemite, doesn't have Sturdy. So Magneton just gets immediately destroyed by a quad-effective Bulldoze, leaving Watson with his single HP Magnemite. All I've got to do is swap in my own Magnemite, hit it with a Thunder Shock, and get my 3rd gym badge. We then move on through Route 113, 14, which actually has an encounter for us to pick up. I run into Starscream the Skarmory, which puts our Pokemon with sturdy count up to 3, which means we've reached a couple of very big problems. The next 2 boss fights we have to face are Maxie and Flannery. The rest of the game has a lot more tricky boss fights for Steel types, and because we only have 1 more encounter available for the rest of the game, losing a single Pokemon could cause ripple effects through the entire run. We really can't afford to lose anything, but we still have to go into these fights. Maxie is way less of a problem than Flannery. His team isn't full of fire types, but he still has a very powerful Camerupt. He also annoyingly leads with his intimidating Mightyena, so I instead lead with my special attacking Bumblebee. Unfortunately, Mightyena kinda has an answer for special attackers too, with Snarl lowering our special attack stat. The plan for Magnemite isn't really to attack though. Instead, I paralyze it with Thunder Wave before going for Volt Switch to swap out. Because of paralysis, Bumblebee outspeeds and is almost able to take out half of Mightyena's health before swapping out into Optimus. Mightyena ends up being paralyzed on the switch, giving me the opportunity to Iron Head the next turn, which actually just takes it out. Camerupt comes in second, which is a much bigger problem. Because Mightyena didn't break Optimus's sturdy, I don't have to swap to Skarmory right away and can stay in against the quad effect of Earth Power, going down to 1 HP, getting a bit of it back with an Oranberry and firing back with a Bulldoze just to get a little bit of damage and lower its speed stat. Now I've got a switch, but because Camerupt goes for Earth Power, I'm able to just dodge it by sending in a Flying type. Skarmory unfortunately doesn't get Bulldoze, so my best bet is going for Rock Tomb, which doesn't look like it's a 2-hit KO. Maxie, however, as wise as his grunts, just goes for Amnesia, which doesn't actually reduce the damage from Rock Tomb whatsoever. Finally, he does go for the Lava Plume, which will take us down to Sturdy, and if it gets a burn, it's over for Starscream. With a 30% chance of that happening, I wasn't too happy about my odds, but I end up not getting burned, and Camerupt goes down to an Air Cutter. Finally, he's got a Golbat, but since Megatron is at full health, it's no match, and we get through the fight unscathed. All this means, however, is we now have a much bigger problem to deal with. Our team is not equipped to handle fire types, and that is a massive understatement. Luckily, it's really only one of her fire types that's any threat at all, since Slugma just immediately goes down to a Bulldoze. This introduces the real problem, Torkoal. It's very likely to set up the Sun the first turn, but I really don't want to take my chances with an Overheat, so I swap out into Skarmory as said Sun is set up. Unfortunately, I really don't have any good options here, so I just fire off a Rock Tomb. A Sun-boosted Overheat completely melts Starscream, taking it down to just 1 HP with Sturdy. It also lowers Torkoal's special attack, but because of the Sun, we really can't swap anything in anyway. Nothing is gonna survive, and I was left with a very difficult choice. And here I am now with hindsight telling you that I made the wrong choice. In the fight, I decided to stay in and sacrifice Skarmory. My thinking was I probably need Magnemite in order to beat Wallace, and I figured Aggron would be way more useful than Skarmory, but this ignores one crucial fact. With Skarmory now gone, I have no way to counter ground-type moves. More specifically, I'm basically checkmated by Winona's Altaria. It's got Recovery, a way to boost its defense very fast, and my only counter against it was Skarmory. So making that sacrifice, which does let all my other team members survive the fight, means I've most likely doomed the entire run. Before we run headfirst into that disaster though, we can actually evolve Magnemite into Magneton. We also have to take on my father, a fight that we can actually guarantee to win with Aron. Because Aron gets Protect by level up, and we've picked up Dig at this point, there's a way to guarantee to simply never get hit. We start by going for Protect to dodge Slaking's active turn. Then during the Truant turn, we dig underground, and because Slaking's faster, it can't hit us because we're still underground, and we end up connecting after it uses its move. During the following Truant turn, we dig underground again, and just repeat this process until Slaking's done for. The one thing that can slow us down is potions, since Dig only has 10 PP. This is where Protect comes in, since we can just use it every other turn and then attack Slaking during its Truant turn in order to take it out. Aside from his 2 Slakings, however, he does also have a Vigoroth, which ends up immediately encoring me. In the short term, this isn't a problem, since I'm encored into Ironhead, which is a 2-hit KO, and this Vigoroth really has no good way of dealing damage to me. But as soon as we've dealt with the Vigoroth, we still have to face that final Slaking, and we really don't want to be encored into Ironhead. The simple solution to all this is to just swap out as soon as Slaking comes in. This does mean we get hit by a super effective Pain Attack, which doesn't even come close to taking us out, even as a critical hit. So from there, we get a free turn of Truant to swap back into Optimus, who very easily claims the victory with a few more Protects and Ironheads. This increases the level cap to 35, so we can now evolve Optimus into Lairon. Oh boy, not this guy.
Why, hello.
It seems Steven has learned the truth, and he's taking me to a deserted island to be imprisoned forever. In an an unexpected turn of events, however, Team Magmagoons show up and we're forced to team up to save our lives. This battle is somewhat of an issue, since the enemy AI is somewhat unpredictable, and Steven always goes for the coughing. He immediately takes it out with his Zen Headbutt, so it's kind of like a 2-on-1 versus Camerupt, which is still a problem. Leading with Optimus, however, baits the Earth Power, so as I dig underground, I can avoid it, giving Metang a chance to hit it with a Zen Headbutt before my dig connects. That extra damage means the dig is enough to take it out, and so we don't lose any further Pokemon. Steven agrees to allow me to leave the island, but in return, I've got to help him take down Team Magma. Tabitha once again only has the one Camerupt, which is a lot easier to play around than multiple Pokemon we're weak to. And while Optimus can survive one hit with Sturdy, we're still not faster. This means whatever we do will just get taken out at the start of the next turn unless we have a strategy. Luckily, the perfect answer to our problem is simply using Bulldoze, which doesn't quite have enough power to be a 2-hit KO, but at least we can lower Camerupt's speed, which lets us outpace it and dig underground the next turn, giving us enough power to take it out with a second hit. There is one more boss fight before we have to take on Winona, but this fight versus May simply isn't very dangerous because of the location. Due to the constant rain, the fire-type moves barely deal any damage to Metang at all, so we win incredibly easily since there's no good way for May to hurt me, except by giving me the HM for Fly and telling me to fly home, which I can't because of my fallen bird.
Are you feeling mad? Yeah. Are you feeling kinda sad too? Yeah.
Well, I'm about to cash in on that terrible decision as I face the 6th gym leader, Winona, and her flying types. We're not completely screwed from the very beginning, but if she manages to set up even a single Cotton Guard, we're pretty much lost on the spot. So I needed to craft a strategy to make her the least likely to do so. Swellow unfortunately breaks my Sturdy with Quick Attack, which at least means I don't have to deal with Double Team and can take it out with a single Charge Beam. Altaria comes in second, and though we are no longer completely safe with Sturdy, we can still tank a non-crit Earthquake. And we actually really want it to go for it so that it doesn't set up its defense, and we're allowed to lower its speed with Thunder Wave. Now that Bumblebee's faster and has to switch out, I go for a Volt Switch, making use of that special attack boost we got earlier, taking Altaria deep into the red. Altaria hits Megatron with an Earthquake on the switch, so I make use of the single Shuckaberry we get throughout the entire game. We're pretty much forced to do this since Winona's guaranteed to go for Hyper Potion the next turn, gaining all of Altaria's health back. I take the opportunity to set up my attack a little bit by going for Power Up Punch and then outspeeding with an Iron Head, hoping for a flinch. Unfortunately, I'm hit by another Earthquake. However, because of all that defense we invested earlier, I actually tank it fairly comfortably and can take Altaria out with a second Iron Head. Pelipper comes in next and is very true to its Gen 3 counterpart by just going for Protect. The next turn I hit it with a Zen Headbutt and it retaliates with Water Pulse, which would be pretty devastating if it got a Confusion. That thankfully does not happen since it probably would have ended the run, and I'm able to take Pelipper out the next turn with another Iron Head. Finally, we only have to deal with Winona's Skarmory, but all of its attacking moves are actually resisted by every single one of our Pokemon. You might think this would make it very easy to deal with, but after I manage to land a couple of Iron Heads to take it down into the yellow, I'm forced to swap out after a second Steel Wing. This should be very easy for Optimus to deal with, but this Skarmory has Sand Attack, and if Antler Boy can get accuracy screwed, Antler Boy gets accuracy screwed. I endure 4 turns of not being able to hit this thing before I call it quits and swap out to Magneton. But my troubles don't stop there, no, because I immediately get Sand Attacked as I swap in. I then go on to miss 4 more Thunder Waves before finally connecting. I then swap out to rid myself of all those accuracy drops, thankfully getting hit by an Aerial Ace on the switch, and finally, because of the paralysis, I'm able to outspeed and take out Skarmory with a Rock Slide. And while that fight was insanely frustrating at the end, it actually ended up working out quite well with the strategy I used. With Winona defeated, we have the final showdown versus May in Lilycove City. This fight goes extremely well though, since I Volt Switch to take out her Swellow, which allows me a free switch into Metang as Blaziken comes in. This is the only time we face Blaziken, and May decides to go for Quick Attack, just handing us the victory on a silver platter, which I'll certainly take at this point. We then reach the Team Magma hideout, where Optimus has to take on 5 grunts at once.
Did you forget who I am? I'm Optimus Prime.
Here we also have to face Courtney, but much like Tabitha, she suffers from the single Camerupt problem, and Optimus deals with her swiftly. And with all that experience, Optimus transforms into the final form, Aggron. We then have to deal with Tate and Liza, who, unlike their Emerald counterparts, retain their Ruby and Sapphire teams. The only thing possibly threatening at all would be Optimus getting hit by a Solar Beam, but we can very easily make sure that never happens, since Solrock either has to set up the sun, which it does, or start charging up Solar Beam. In either case, we can just aim both of our Iron Heads at Solrock and be rid of the problem. Even though it's not really a problem, it's just the worst thing that could possibly happen. After Solrock falls, Lunatone puts Metang to sleep, but a single Iron Head from Aggron is all it takes to claim our 7th gym badge. This means we have to continue our chase after Team Magma for the final showdown. This isn't actually something I'm too afraid of, since we can pick up the TM for Earthquake right before the fight. We can also evolve Metang into Metagross, which we could have done a bit earlier, but we have to manage our experience a bit. There's only a 1 level difference between the last 2 gyms, and we've got a legendary to take on. But first, we have to take on Maxie in the final Team Magma showdown. There are 2 big reasons I'm not scared of this fight in particular. Maxie only has 1 fire type on his team, and because it's his Mega Evolution, he's guaranteed to use it last. On top of that, because he uses Mega Evolution, as per the rules, I too am allowed to Mega Evolve. And Mega Metagross is an absolute monster. It immediately outspeeds Mightyena, taking it out with a single 40 base power-up punch, which also incidentally boosts its attack. With now crazy amounts of power, we face his second Pokemon, Weezing, which is of course weak to Zen Headbutt, so it goes down immediately. Third out is his Crobat, which is very fast, but not as fast as Mega Metagross, so it too falls to a super effective Zen Headbutt. Finally, Maxie has his very own Mega Evolution, Mega Camerupt. But the game just gave us the means to destroy this thing in the room before this very fight. So finally, with a single Earthquake, we take care of Maxie, and now we have to deal with the problems in his wake. Team Magma's unleashed Groudon upon the world, and unfortunately, it falls to us to deal with this ground type. Before we fight it, however, we can actually pick up the final encounter of the run here in the Cave of Origin, Mawile. Not only does this give us access to Intimidate, but in the 6th generation, it attained the Fairy type. Primal Groudon is stronger than regular Groudon, but the one good thing about this matchup is that it gains the Fire type. That might sound crazy, but it means we can hit it for super effective damage with Earthquake. Groudon is of course a wild Pokemon, so just randomly selects Rest. This lets me go for Power Punch and boost my attack for free. The reason Megatron is faster the second turn is its Mega Evolved speed only applies the turn after you Mega Evolve. Unfortunately, the true difficulty that's caused by this fight is that Metagross is the only Pokemon that can beat it and is thus forced to grow to level 47, which means we're not allowed to use it in the next fight versus Wallace. After defeating Groudon, we get access to new Mauville and can thus evolve Magneton into Magnezone. So even though we picked up a new encounter, we still have to enter this next fight with only 3 team members. The only reason I have 4 on my team is because I had to use a Pokemon to surf to the gym, which I of course can't use in the fight. Wallace of course leads with Luvdisc, so I send in Magnezone. Regardless whether it goes for Water Pulse or Sweet Kiss, it has a chance to confuse us, so I equip Magnezone with a Person Berry before the fight, which I don't end up having to use since I just take out Luvdisc after it misses. I Volt Switch into Mawile and instantly run into a problem. It seems because I used Volt Switch, I don't actually get the Intimidate drop. This stupid error on my part means Whiscash is a much bigger threat to the team. Regardless, this is a Nuzlocke, and I'm already in the fight, so I just have to deal with it. My Crunch ends up being a critical hit, which is huge, and then Galvatron takes a massive amount of damage from Earthquake, just barely hanging on. I need to keep Mawile around, so I swap out into Optimus, who takes a massive amount of damage, but actually survives on 4 HP instead of Sturdy. I then go for my own Earthquake, which thankfully is enough to take Whiscash out. But all this has just been set up for the real problem, Milotic. Unfortunately, I can't really swap out here with 2 Pokemon in the red, and one would just get 2-shot without even outspeeding. So I'm forced to stay in, and Optimus is lucky enough to dodge a Hydro Pump, which is actually pretty huge, since it first lets me hit it with a Bulldoze, and then outspeed with an Earthquake for some pretty huge damage. The next Hydro Pump connects, and sadly, that's the end for Optimus Prime. With Optimus going down and a free switch into Bumblebee, I'm actually guaranteed to win the fight. But this fight isn't the problem. It's the fact that I now only have 3 Pokemon remaining to take on the entire Elite 4. Even though this does mean that I've managed to make it through all 8 gym badges, things just aren't looking particularly bright. The final Elite 4 team is not much to talk about. We've got Galvatron the Mawile with Power-Up Punch, Iron Head, Crunch, and Play Rough. Bumblebee the Magnezone with Volt Switch, Flash Cannon, Thunderbolt, and Charge Beam. And Megatron the Metagross with Bullet Punch, Iron Head, Earthquake, and Power-Up Punch. I've made it this far, and at this point, I might as well send it and see how far I can make it. Losing a single single Pokemon probably means we lose the run, so we have to play this fairly cautiously. Much like versus Maxie earlier, I send in Magnezone to soak up and intimidate. Metagross is in fact weak to Dark, so my best bet to deal with Sydney is to use Mawile. So after getting hit by a Sucker Punch, I use Volt Switch, which actually just ends up taking Mightyena out in one hit, and I get to swap in Galvatron, but this way I still dodge the Intimidate. Shiftry wastes a turn by going for Fake Out, making me flinch, but the following turn I go for a Power-Up Punch to boost my attack. Shiftry hits back with a resisted Leaf Blade, which barely does any damage at all. And so a second Power-Up Punch takes it out and gets Mawile to +2. Third out is Sharpedo, which is the only Pokemon on Sydney's team that's actually faster than Mawile after the EV training I did. It deals a bit of damage with Aqua Jet before getting one-shot by a Power-Up Punch as I get to +3 and take a bit more damage from Rough Skin. Sydney now has 2 Pokemon left, but they're both slower than Galvatron, and at +3, Play Roughs are more than enough to take them out. Second out is Phoebe, who's a bit more of an issue since we can't set up with Power-Up Punch to boost her attack against her Ghost types. She leads with Dusclops, and I send in Mawile since it has Crunch. It's not quite enough to take Dusclops out, but leaves it in the red and gets the defense drop. Dusclops then goes for Confuse Ray, but because this is the only status it can inflict, it's very easy to prepare for by just equipping a Held Person Berry. Phoebe then goes for a Full Restore, but because of the defense drop we got earlier, the next Crunch is actually just a one-hit KO. Since Generation 3, her ace has been upgraded into Dusknoir. Even though this thing has Fire Punch, I decide to stay in and go for Crunch, which does manage to do over half and even get a defense drop again. A crit Fire Punch is never enough to take us out, so we're safe to just stay in here and take Dusknoir out the following turn with a second Crunch. With her Dusknoir and Dusclops defeated, she's got 2 Bannettes and a Sableye left. Expecting this first one is her Will-O-Wisp Banette, I decide to swap out into my special attacking Magnezone. I then start launching Charge Beams to boost Magnezone's special attack. Phoebe desperately tries to hang on with a Full Restore, but because the first Charge Beam gave me a boost, the second one just takes Banette out. Second out is Sableye, dealing a massive 6 damage with a critical hit Fake Out, but more importantly getting some chip damage with Burn. We then outspeed the next turn, and a +2 Thunderbolt is enough to take Sableye out. Finally, she's got one more Banette, and I should have definitely swapped out here since a critical hit Shadow Ball does take Bumblebee out, but we don't end up getting punished, taking out the Banette with a Thunderbolt to beat Phoebe. Our best matchup in the Elite Four is by far versus Glacia. Steel versus Ice is just no contest, especially when Power-Up Punch is super effective as well. The first one almost takes out half of Glalie health as it just sets up the Hail. From there, a second Power-Up Punch takes Glalie out and gets us to +2 attack in the process. Second out is Glacia's first Frostlass, and this is the entire reason I taught Megatron Bullet Punch, to be able to outspeed these things and just take them out in one shot without worrying about getting hit by a super effective Shadow Ball. Once they're defeated, Glacia doesn't put up any real resistance, since Walrein just gets defeated by a single Iron Head, and her second Glalie goes down the same way. The true test of the Hoenn Elite Four is Drake, the Master of Dragons. The reason Mawile was faster than Sydney's Pokemon, and the entire reason I invested so many speed EVs, is to outspeed most of Drake's Dragon. In fact, every single one except Salamence. This means I should, in theory, win this fight extremely easy by just one-shotting every single one of his first 4 Pokemon with Play Rough. The only thing that could go wrong is missing. And I end up missing the 90% accurate Play Rough at the worst possible time. The only Pokemon that can one-shot Galvatron is the one of his 2 Flygons with Earthquake. This leaves Drake with 4 living dragons, and I only have 2 Pokemon to beat them. Magnezone is 4 times weak to Earthquake, so I have to settle for Metagross, who's only 2 times weak to Earthquake. It looks like all those defense EVs we got right before challenging May on Route 210 paid off, since we can take a single Earthquake without going below half health. After an Iron Head, it looks like Drake's gonna go for a Full Restore, so I take the opportunity to go for a Power-Up Punch to set up my attack to +1. Power-Up Punch does get a crit, so I was really hoping a Bullet Punch would take Flygon out, but it's not quite enough, and we get confused by Supersonic. At this point, I've basically lost all hope, and as Drake heals up to full again, I expect to hit myself and the run to be over. But Megatron pulls through and deals over half damage with a Bullet Punch. I'm still confused the next turn, but Metagross is determined to get as far as possible and takes out Flygon with a second Bullet Punch. Unfortunately, Drake has a second Flygon, but at least this thing doesn't have Earthquake. I thought about it for a long time, and because I'm confused, I decide to swap out into Bumblebee, who's unfortunately gonna have to take the Flamethrower. It doesn't quite do over half, meaning we'll at least get to use one move after it outspeeds with a second Flamethrower, even getting a burn. I go for the only move that can hit Flygon, but the Flash Cannon isn't enough to take it out. And after a third Flamethrower, Bumblebee is burnt to a crisp, leaving me with only one Pokemon, Metagross. Flygon is faster, so I'm forced to use Bullet Punch to take it out when I would have loved to set up with a Power-Up Punch. Drake then sends in his Ace Salamence, which fails to lower my attack with Intimidate due to Clear Body. Unfortunately, this Salamence has Crunch, which is super effective in the 6th generation. With its massive defense, Metagross is able to tank it and restore some health with a Citrus Berry, firing back with an Iron Head. I desperately click Bullet Punch, and to my surprise, it's enough to take Salamence out, leaving just Kingdra. I go for an Earthquake and just pray to survive, as Kingdra hits me with a yawn. And because I'm faster, I realize that my Earthquake's gonna take it out, and I just beat Drake. It cost me every single Pokemon I have but one, but it might be the only one I need. I may have stolen this Pokemon from Steven, but it might just be the exact tool I need to defeat him. Steven, like myself, is a master of Steel types, and while I barely got to use my own Skarmory, thinking it would even cause my defeat to lose it, in this fight, Steven's Skarmory could be the entire reason I win. You see, this thing has Toxic, Aerial Ace, Spikes, and Steel Wing. Metagross is of course unaffected by Toxic by virtue of being a Steel type. Spikes doesn't actually do anything since I literally can't swap out, and the 2 resisted attacking moves will bounce off my max defense. All this to say that Skarmory is pretty much the perfect punching bag to set up with Power-Up Punches. After my 3rd Power-Up Punch, Skarmory is low enough to be in full restore range. This is actually way more of a benefit than it's a problem, since it means I get to use more Power-Up Punches to set up my attack even further. In fact, I managed to get Metagross up to max attack, since my 5th Power-Up Punch just barely misses out on the KO, and I have to use a 6th to take Skarmory out. It only cost me 41 HP to get to max attack, which is a way better ratio than Belly Drum. I Iron Head Aggron down to its sturdy, and we could face a powerful Earthquake, but I end up getting the flinch. Metagross is faster, so any move would do, but I take it out with Bullet Punch. Claydol comes in next, and we don't have any super effective moves from this thing, but at +6, we don't need it, since Iron Head just takes it out. Next are Steven's 2 fossils, but because they're rock types, Iron Head's super effective and takes them both out easily. Finally, Steven only has his own Mega Metagross left, leaving us on equal footing. But because he Mega Evolved this turn, I'm guaranteed to be faster, and at +6, this Earthquake isn't something his Metagross will be surviving. And so, through all the bad luck and terrible losses, I'd done it. I'd beaten a Pokemon Omega Ruby Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Steel types. And after that miss, I'm amazed that we even made it past Drake. If this is the type of content you enjoy, I've got tons more on my channel, and until we see each other next time,